Hello everybody. Chapter 2, entitled Animals and Human Language, traces some specific characteristics of human language and how some other species have something in common with that language. In fact, aside from the evolution and the biological development of humans, language is fundamentally what separates humans from other species. Language is essential to human life, and it is truly hard to imagine what life would be like without that language. However, it is important to put in mind that other animals also communicate. Your pet may communicate with you when it is hungry. Ants also may use sounds, and these sounds are unhearable to humans to indicate social status and distress. Bees may dance to tell one another where to find honey, to warn another with the dances of their wings. Chimpanzees can also learn from sign language. So all these are truly types of communication, and here we need to know something about or some stories about these creatures that can talk. So we hear a lot of stories about these birds, about birds that can talk. Uh, Here in the book, we have some highlighted lines that indicate the introduction that I have just made. So we usually assume that they are maybe fictitious, so they are not true, or that they involve birds or animals simply imitating something they have heard humans say. Yet, we think that creatures are capable of communicating. Of course, they are capable of communicating, but in a way that is different from people's communication using the language that we use in everyday interaction. Certainly, with other members of their own species, so they communicate with each other. It is not possible for bees to communicate with the humans, however, it is very possible for them to communicate with each other. Now, the book also raises some important questions, and the answer of these questions are going to be found in the details that come later with the videos. So, is it possible that a creature could learn to communicate with the humans using language? Now, what is that language through which these species can communicate with language, or I mean with the humans? Through language. It means the stress here or the centeredness is about how these creatures or these species are able to communicate with the humans using a particular language. Now, does the human language have properties that make it so unique, so special, that it is quite unlike any other communication system, and hence this language would be unlearnable by any other creature? So now there should be some specific characteristics and properties which make humans' language use particular features through which it is going to be different from other types of communication using the communicative tools. Now, are these characteristics learnable to other creatures? So the answer of these questions are going to be found in the coming sections and subsections. Let's see. Communication is simply the act of transferring information from one place, from one person or a group of people to another. Each communication should involve at least one sender and a message, and as well we have a recipient to that message. This may sound simple, but communication is actually very complex subject. Now, before all here, we need to differentiate between what? Between two types of communication. It is, as you see here in front of you, the communicative signals and the informative signals. If you go to the glossary at the end of the book, you find that the definition of communicative signals is that behavior used intentionally بشكل متعمد to provide information, while the informative signals, it is just on the opposite. It is how to provide information unintentionally. Now, some of the examples are provided here that someone listening to you may become informed about you through a number of signals. You may do something, you may practice, or you may experience some signals or some actions that indicate your status maybe. Now, she may note that you have a cold. Now, while sneezing, it is very easy for others to recognize you as having or catching cold. Now, when you are not at ease, you might shift from around in your seat. And when you are disorganized, it is very clear from the necktie or maybe from the socks that you put, right? Now, you might be also recognized from your accent, the strange accent that you use while communicating with others. Now, another example here we have when somebody says, I'm not or I'm one of the applicants for the vacant position of senior brain surgeon at the hospital. Now, normally here we have what? Two different examples. For example, the way you put your socks or the way that you put on your dress, this is an intentional informative signals, right? But now when you say that I'm somebody or I'm here to do something, it is what? It is a communicative signal. So now you intentionally send your message to the recipient in this way. Now again here we have something that humans are capable of doing, which is producing sounds and syllables in a stream of speech that appears to have no communicative purpose. So there is no communicative purpose. However, this is again a type of using or practicing the language in our own daily interaction. This is called the glossolalia, and the definition of this, I mean, the detailed definition can be found at the end of the book under the section of glossary. Now, it is what? Speaking in tongues, now, which is associated with the religious practices of Pentecostal churches, right? Now, these outpowering sounds, like language, it is not particularly a language or a communicative language. However, it sounds like language, but with no speaker control. It isn't intentional communication. Now, this is again here the sound. The thing that sounds like a language is an intentional communicative activity. We might say, so this is also important to be noted as well. We might say the same thing about some of the chirping and singing produced by birds. So the same thing humans do, birds may do also while they dance. Now, again, here we have what we also do not assume that the black bird is communicating anything. So there is no intentional communication done by blackbirds when having black feathers. So you see here, sitting on a branch, when a bird sits on a branch and looks down at the ground. So this is what, for us, there is no interpretation of what that bird doing when sitting on a birch and looking at the ground. So these are again examples of what? Of the sound like language, but not. However, we don't know actually whether what that bird is doing is a kind of communication or not. For us as humans, there is no interpretation. There is no particular interpretation to what that bird may do while sitting on that branch of a tree. However, the bird is considered to be sending a communicative message to what? To their prototypes. But for us, again, this is another indication that we have no particular interpretation to how the squawking of birds means ضحك or قهقه, sorry, that is produced when a cat appears maybe on the scene. So maybe it is a kind of a warning signal to other birds when that bird sitting on that branch of a tree looking at the ground. So this is just an assumption, but there is nothing concrete. So when we talk about distinctions between human language and animal communication, we are considering both in terms their potential as a means of intentional communication. Well, the book also displays some properties or distinctive features, let's say, that are very special to human language. It is not about communication, of course. Now, communication is okay, is a primary function of language. So without communication, without language, sorry, there will be no communication at all. But is it the only distinctive feature? Is it the only thing that human language is distinct or distinguished, sorry, from other type of species? No, of course not. Let's see. Well, while we tend to think about or of communication as a primary function of a human language, it is not distinguishing feature or a distinguishing feature of a human language. Why? Because other species can communicate, as we talked about a minute ago. So bees can communicate, dogs can communicate, other types of animals can communicate. Sorry, humans can communicate. That's why it is not the only thing that the language of a human is rich of. No. Now all creatures communicate in some way, right? Even if it is not through vocalization, even if it is not through speaking. However, we suspect, Shuk, that other creatures are not reflecting on the way they create their communicative message or revealing how they work. That is, now the barking of the dog is probably not offering advice to another barking dog. So dogs cannot advise other dogs while barking. People can use many warning messages through using the language, right? So again, here we have what? These are sounds, truly they are sounds, but a sound more menacing. They are not barking about barking, not like humans who are clearly able to reflect on the language and its uses. For example, I wish he wouldn't use so many technical terms. That is called reflexivity. Reflexivity is what is the property that accounts for the fact that we can use the language to think and talk about language itself. Now, to advise somebody, to warn somebody, how? It is through the use of language. We use different phrases, warning messages, so we reflect on the language itself by using words that are found in the lexical, or through use some lexemes that indicates warning, or you may express your happiness, you may express your sadness through using the language itself. But barking of dogs, there are sounds, of course, but they are not able, I mean, for dogs to advise that dog not to bark loud. So now making it one of the distinguishing features of a human language. So what reflexivity is, what is the most or is the only distinctive feature of humans language. Without this general ability, without being able to reflect or use the language to talk or to describe some features or something about the language, we would not be able to reflect on or identify any of the other distinct properties of a human language. These five features, let's say displacement, arbitrariness, productivity, cultural transmission, and duality, these five features are the distinctive properties of a human language, but they will not be existing if there is no reflexivity. Why? Because reflexivity is the only factor, is the only means, is the only property that distinguishes human languages or a human language from other types of, from other species while communicating with each other. Now, the first feature, let's say the first property of humans or a human language is displacement. Displacement means what? Means the ability to join or rejoin events or activities took place in the past, things that are currently being done, and things that may happen in the future. So we are able to what? To move on time, to move from one era to another era, to talk about the past, to recall the past, to talk about the present, to move on to talk about or describe actions or activities that might take place in the future. So this is one of, or the first possibility, or the first unique, or similarly, that it is not that unique actually. However, some other creatures may participate or may share humans with this property. Let's see some of the examples that are very exclusive here in this section or in the first property of human language. Now it is first about time and place. Okay. Now when your cat produces some sounds like mewing, it means something to that cat. So it is communicating in a way or another, as we said previously. The different species are able to communicate, so communication is not that unique and distinctive feature or a property of a human language. All species are communicating in their own way. So, but displacement, to talk about these three times, is not possible for cats or for dogs to talk about. Now, it is not designed exclusively for this moment. Now, the mowing or the barking of dogs, mowing of cats are momentary. So they talk about things or they communicate about things that are happening now. It isn't used to relate events, so there is no possibility to join the events that I talked about that are far removed in time and place. Dogs, in the same vein, are not capable of communicating with the growling they make, with the barking they may use. In contrast, on the contrary, human language users are normally capable of producing messages equivalent to the sounds produced by cats or dogs. Now, this property, humans can refer to the past and the future time. This property of a human language is called what? Displacement. It allows language users to talk about things and events not present in the immediate environment. Again, here there is the possibility to look at bee communication. Now, the property of displacement is shared between, let's say, there is some shared or common factors between human language and bees communication. But as a small exception, because it seems to have some version of displacement. So bees and humans can share or may share the property of displacement. They communicate or they use displacement when a honeybee finds a source of nectar and returns to the beehive. It can perform a dance. So through dancing or through the dancing of the wings of the bee, they can communicate with each other to refer to the source of food. Bees, the location of this nectar, depending on the type of dance, right? So the other bees can work out where this newly discovered feast can be found. But doesn't this ability of the bee to indicate a location of a distance or distance away means that bee communication has at least some degree of displacement as a feature? Yes. But what kind of displacement they are showing or they are using? It is displacement of a very limited type. Now it is for humans, they are able to recall things or events happened maybe 10, 6, 15 years ago. They may talk about things they expect to happen in the future, maybe 10 years from now. Okay? So this ability is very distinctive to humans. While the displacement of the bees, the ability of displacement of bees, they are of very limited type. It doesn't have a range of possibilities found in a human. Certainly, the bee can direct other bees to food source. However, it must be the most recent food source. It must be very recent in time. So bees are not able to displace things that happened maybe a day ago, but momentarily is okay. For a very short period of time is okay, but not for that, let's say, a bigger one. The second property is arbitrariness, which means al-ashwa'iyya. Now, when we're talking about al-ashwa'iyya or arbitrariness, it is generally the case that there is no natural connection between a linguistic form and its meaning. So there is no connection between the shape of that object with its meaning. It is arbitrary. We can't just look at the Arabic word kalb and from its shape. So the shape of the dog doesn't mean or doesn't have any connection with the name of that object. For example, determine that it has a natural and obvious meaning and any more than we can with its English translation form dog. So the linguistic form kaf, lam, ba, or dog has no natural or iconic relationship with that hairy four-legged barking object out in the world. Okay, so this is one of the examples used in the book to talk about the disconnection, the zero connection between the shape of the object and the name of that object. That is why it is arbitrariness. It means the naming of the objects is put or is set arbitrarily. Arbitrariness, it is possible as in Child's Game, and then the book proceeds to give some examples that describes the disconnection between the shape of the object with its name. Okay, as you see here in figure 2. Now there are some words in language. Truly, we talked about this in the previous video, that we have some other exceptions, but these exceptions are very rare. The exception is what? Is about the, for example, the cow, if you remember, and the cuckoo. So these also are found in English language, for example, but they are very rare. So these examples are very few number of these examples are found, and it is called onomatopoeic words. It means the connection between the shape or the sounds produced by that bird with the word meaning. Okay, so each variety of animal communication consists of, now this is now in this paragraph, there is a description of the let's say the majority of the signals used by animals, for example, dogs and cats that are previously mentioned. Each variety of animal communication, now there is a description of the animal communication now, consists of a limited set of vocal gesture forms. Again, here there is an importance to recall the things that described in the previous video. There is a limited number of sounds, or let's say sound-like system found in animals. Many of these forms are only used in specific situations. So these animals are able to use these, let's say, sounds in a specific or in specific situations, not at any particular time they choose. Okay. Property again is another productivity. Sorry, is another property of human language. Now humans are continually creating new expressions. To limit the number or to count the number of expressions and utterances produced by humans, it will be to no avail. Actually, there will be no possibility to count the number of the reproduced sentences or utterances used by humans. Why? Because they are able to talk about or describe events according to the situation they are in. So humans are continually creating new expressions by manipulating their linguistic resources to describe new objects and situations. This property is described as productivity, or sometimes it's called creativity or open-endedness. So there will be no limited number of sentences produced by humans, and essentially means that the potential number al-muhtamal of utterances in any language or human language is infinite. So they are not limited. This is on the contrary with other types of species at all. The communication system of other creatures are not like that. Cicadas, نوع من أنواع الحشرات, have 4 signals. They have only 4 signals to choose from, and vervet monkeys have 36 vocal calls. Okay? Nor does it seem possible for creatures to produce new signals. So they have a limited number of signals. They use some of these signals, or maybe one signal in a particular situation. But to produce new signals, or to, let's say, manipulate different signals to talk about or to describe a particular situation, it is for animals impossible. For humans, it is possible to describe or to use infinite number of utterances. Now, producing new signals to communicate novel or experiences or events. Now, the book proceeds to give very detailed examples about different types of species like the bees, even some other types of animals, as well as monkeys or apes. They explain here how this property is very limited. So I would recommend you to go to read about some of the examples to know more about what does productivity mean. Now, this lack of productivity in animal communication can be described in terms of fixed reference. So they have some fixed references through which they can choose to use in a particular situation. Not like a human, humans who are able to choose different utterances, sentences. They may paraphrase some other phrases to talk about different situations or to describe events that take place or took place in a situation. Each signal in the communication system of other creatures seems to be fixed in terms of relating to a particular occasion or purpose, even purposes. So it will be highly recommended again to go to look at the examples detailed in the book here, okay? Now, cultural transmission is another property of human language. The question is about what do we inherit from our parents biologically is okay. So you may inherit the physical features from the parents, such as the brown eyes, the dark hair, but we do not inherit their language. We acquire a language in a culture with other speakers and not from parents' genes. Now, we may inherit some biological features from the parents, from our ancestors maybe, but it is not with the language. This is very important property for humans' language. Let's see how. Now, an infant, this is an example, and this example for clarification. An infant born to Korean parents in Korea, okay, but adopted, that means that he or she is raised up where? And brought up from birth by English speakers. Is that baby or newborn baby from the Korean parents who is brought up in a different culture is going to inherit the Korean language? Let's see. Now, this baby, again, an infant born to Korean parents in Korea, but adopted تبني وترعرع from birth by English speakers in the United States will have what? The physical characteristics inherited from his or her natural parents means what? That baby is going to inherit the physical characteristics. Maybe the brown eyes, the dark hair, the body, and other biological features or characteristics. This is okay, but will inevitably, it means غير قابل للنقاش, speak English. Why? Because that baby was brought up in an English culture, not in a Korean one. Now, this process whereby a language is passed, هسه احنا هنا اللغة ما نقدر نورثها أو نورثها لأحد. On from one generation to the next is described as the cultural transmission. It means what? It depends on the culture where that baby is going or is brought up in. It's clear that humans are born with some kind of predisposition. This feature, we talked about it actually. We talked about this feature in the previous videos, that with the divine source or even with the language gene, we are born with a predisposition to acquire language in general sense. We have the mindset, we have the ability to acquire the language. However, we are not born with the ability to produce utterances. We are not limited to produce particular utterances in a specific language such English. We acquire our first language as children in a culture. So it depends. Now, the language that you are going to use when you grow up depends on the culture in which you are or you were brought up. The general pattern in animal communication is that creatures are born with a set of specific signals. Now, with animals or with other creatures, they inherit these specifications. They inherit these signals that are produced instinctively, that are produced in a particular situation. But for humans, it depends on the culture, which is going to identify the language people use when they grow up and able to speak fluently. The fifth and last property displayed in the book is duality. Now, with the duality is another distinctive feature that is very rich in with human languages. Human language is organized at two levels. So this is important now to understand that human language, all human languages, all live human languages are of two levels or two layers simultaneously. Now the property is called this is called the what? The duality. And if you want to know more about the meaning of duality, you may go back again to the glossary at the end of the book. It is also called double articulation. Now, what does this mean? When we speak, we have what? A physical level at which we produce individual sounds. So there is the level one is the production of the single sounds, like n, b, and as individual sounds. Now, do these sounds have meanings? Let's see. None of these discrete forms has any intrinsic meaning. So if these sounds, level one, is put aside from being combined with each other, there will be no meaning. So n means nothing by itself. B as well, A as well, and other sounds as well. If they are let alone by themselves, they will give no meaning. In a particular combination, when we combine these letters, such as bin, so when these three letters or sounds combine together to produce bin, this is another level is going to be produced here. We have another level producing a meaning that is different from the meaning of the combination of nib. Now, with these three sounds, there is the possibility to produce, as a level one is what? Is the sounds by themselves, individual sounds. Level two is what? When we combine these sounds together to produce another or different words. So from these n, b, and a, we can produce bin, and we can also produce nib. So here we have limited sounds, but we have what? We have two productions, two words or two word meanings. So at one level, we have distinct sounds. This is one. And at another level, we have what? The distinct meaning. So these sounds, when they are combined together, when these sounds combine together, they produce distinct meaning. This duality of levels is one of the most economical features. يعني هنا الحالة الاقتصادية تعمل of a human language, because with a limited set of discrete sounds, يعني عندنا احنا مجموعة من الأصوات المحددة, we are capable of producing. This is exactly what duality means. With a limited set of discrete sounds, we are capable of producing a very large number of sound combinations, like words. They are distinct in meaning. So now we have we have some distinct sounds. Through these sounds, we can produce words. هسه شنو نرجع to the other property of the human language is that we have an infinite number of sets of sounds. Sentences and utterances. So the existence of the limited number of sounds help people to put particular words together, and these words are going to be combined together to produce different sentences. Is this feature found with other creatures? Among other creatures, each communicative signal appears to be a single fixed form that cannot be broken down into separate parts. So the mewing of cats, the barking of dogs, the buzzing of bees, these sounds, if they are called sound like, let's say, are not the barking, the way of the dog barking, as well as the mewing of cats. So the mew is not be cannot be broken into discrete sounds. This is a feature which is not found with other creatures. Okay, so although your dog may be able to produce woof, it doesn't seem to do so on the basis of a distinct level of production combination and separate elements of W and double O and F. So again, this fifth property, which is the last property displayed in the book, is a very important an economic feature that is very rich in or with human languages. And with this property, I end this video 1 in chapter 2. Thank you very much for listening and watching.